おはよう、世界の諸君。今日は素晴らしい知らせを持ってきた。セルゲームを行うことにした。強さに自信のある者も初めての者もどんどん参加してほしい。
俺の好きだった自然や動物たちを守ってやってくれ。頼んだぞ。
もう許さないぞ、お前たち。
STR Gohan and STR Cell descended onto Dokkan 12 days after the livestream broadcast, and boy is there a lot to talk about with these units. Starting with STR Gohan, he gained 100% attack and defense at the start of turn, and 1 ki and 10% attack and defense at the start of each turn, up to a maximum of 5 ki and 70%. His attack stats early on weren't anything special, but he could start dealing solid damage after just a few turns of build-up. Gohan's biggest strength was his ability to stack defense on Super. Just like STR Kale and Caulifla, Gohan stacked defense by 30% on both his 12 and 18 ki Super attacks, making him a defensive god, especially in the legendary Goku event. He also introduced one of the best categories into the game, the Kamehameha category. On top of also giving Super AGL types 3 ki and 120% stats, Gohan's team consisted of many of the best units in the game. Gohan's base form turned out to be much stronger than what most people were expecting based on his leaked details, and he was a strong contender for top 3 STRs in the game before even transforming. Unfortunately for Gohan, his performance in base was all he could rely on, as he was plagued with the single worst active skill condition the game has seen. Gohan had 2 separate ways to trigger his active skill transformation, either when HP was 58% or less with Android 16 on the team, or starting from turn 5 when HP was 58% or lower while an Android's category ally or enemy was present. The sheer number of difficult restrictions stacked on top of each other made it borderline impossible to ever see Gohan transform. To try and remedy this, they released a banner unit Android 16 alongside Gohan, which ended up being one of the dumbest decisions the game has ever made. You see, Android 16 was INT instead of AGL, so it was impossible to run him under Gohan's leader skill. They only shared one category, and that was on STR Cell's team, but that setup was a mess, filled with units that had completely different links and very little synergy. Even though 16 himself wasn't a bad unit and a solid support for Gohan, it didn't matter at all, since there was no realistic way to run the two together. If you were lucky enough to transform Gohan into Super Saiyan 2, he would become an absolute beast of a unit. For every ki sphere obtained, Super Saiyan 2 Gohan gained 1 ki, 20% attack, and 7% defense. Furthermore, when facing one enemy, he created rainbow orbs, and when facing 2 or more enemies, he launched an additional super attack. When there was a Super Saiyan Goku ally attacking in the turn, Gohan gained 59% attack when attacking with 18 or more ki. This final ability in his passive allowed Gohan to reach ludicrous attack stats with several orbs obtained, wiping out the enemy with a 7 million plus super attack. Both his 12 and 18 ki super attacks raised defense by 50% and had a Mega Colossal multiplier, making him only the 3rd STR in the game to have Mega Colossal on both supers. Super Saiyan 2 Gohan was ridiculously busted, and the main culprit behind why Dokkan put so many restrictions on his transformation. Unfortunately, because those restrictions were nearly impossible to meet, most players never saw him transform. As a result, His base form was all we ever got to use, which despite being strong, was nowhere near strong enough to earn him the title of best unit in the game. On the other hand, Cell had a more disappointing base form than Gohan. He led the Android/Cell Saga category for 4 key, 150% to HP and attack, and 170% to defense, and also gave 3 key and 120% to stats to Extreme Int. LR Cell gained 80% attack and defense at the start of turn, and gained up to 80% defense the more HP you had remaining. Additionally, Cell gained 1 key and 20% attack per existing enemy, meaning he was often only gaining an additional 20 to 40% attack on average. While he was good defensively, his attack stats were pitiful compared to the other top tier LRs. He also strangely didn't have shocking speed in his link set, meaning he linked poorly with most villain units outside of other cells. His transformation condition, though not as bad as Gohan's, was also somewhat difficult to achieve. Cell evolved into Perfect Cell when HP was 30% or less at the start of turn. This was almost impossible to see in Dokkan events, but in Super Battle Road, it was fairly common to see Cell transform. Once transformed, Cell fully recovered HP and gained 4 key and 120% attack and defense. Under a double LR Cell lead, Cell would be starting the turn with 12 key, making it very easy to reach 18 or more key. When attacking with 4 or more key spheres obtained, Cell gained 20% attack and defense, an additional 20% attack and defense with 6 or more key spheres, and another 20% attack with 8 or more key spheres obtained. He was a very orb-hungry LR, but with 8 key spheres, he was capable of dishing out very impressive damage. Lastly, Cell possessed an active skill attack that could be used when there was one enemy starting from the turn after he transformed. He was a fantastic option in Super Battle Road and was really solid in the legendary Goku event, but he ended up ranking lower than Gohan on many people's top 10 LR lists. Both Gohan and Cell were incredibly powerful LRs on release, but they came with a plethora of unnecessary restrictions that sparked massive controversy within the community. Gohan's restrictions were so frustrating that an entire movement formed, petitioning Dokkan to change his transformation condition before release, but to no avail. The countdown to the 300 million download celebration brought with it the return of the special ticket banner, this time featuring Dokkan Fest up until transforming Goku and Frieza. They also released the wallpaper feature into the game, allowing players to set specific wallpapers to their home screen. The first ever wallpaper distributed was the Super Warriors wallpaper, featuring the Z Warriors from the Majin Buu saga. Like many people had predicted, the free-to-play Vegeta who released earlier in the month, Dokkan awakened into Vegeta and Trunks, but there was something different about this card. Unlike traditional duo units, this character was named Vegeta/Trunks instead of Vegeta and Trunks, and that's because they debuted a brand new mechanic into the game, Exchange. Exchange units are cards with a passive or active skill that allow them to be exchanged with a different character. As Vegeta, this unit stacked attack on Super and was boasting 70% attack and defense at the start of turn. Starting from turn 3, you could use Vegeta's active skill to exchange into Super Trunks, who gained a massive 120% to stats, but lost 10% attack and defense up to minus 80% with each turn passed. They were a solid unit, but the more interesting free-to-play character was Goku/Gohan, who released at the start of the celebration. Unlike Vegeta, Goku stacked defense on Super, and was also a Goku's family support unit, giving 20% attack and defense. He possessed the same active skill condition as Vegeta, and once exchanged into Gohan, he gained additional stats when facing an Android/Cell Saga category enemy. Goku was far better than Gohan in most cases, but the most valuable part of this unit was that they fulfilled Super Saiyan 2 Gohan's Goku condition, while also providing support to Gohan. 10 new category stages of Super Battle Road arrived on both Global and JP, and players had plenty of options released throughout the past year to conquer these fights. The combo of Hit and Jiren was very lethal in the Universal Survival Saga stage, and LR Baby was a monster in the Giant Form stage. Saiyan Day Vegeta and Tech Trunks were the go-to leaders for the Pure Saiyans in Future Saga stages, and Kid Goku was very helpful against full power. But the MVP for most players was EZA Second Form Frieza, who was released alongside Namek Goku back in May. This free-to-play unit was designed specifically to dominate Super Battle Road, and he was a godsend for the Transformation Boost category stage. Frieza possessed an AoE Super and gained an additional 6 ki and 40% attack and defense when facing 2 or more enemies. He also raised attack by 60% when the enemy's defense was lowered, and launched an active skill attack when facing 3 or more enemies starting from turn 3. Second Form Frieza was a Super Battle Road killer, and was one of the best free-to-play villain units we had ever seen. These new stages also came with a brand new reward card, LR Kid Goku and Bulma. This unit's stat buffs were restricted depending on how many members of certain categories you had on your team, but they were an absolute powerhouse on Int Kid Goku's team. Another worldwide contest was held between the two versions, and this time the winner was decided by the number of broken tiles collected in the tile breaking event. Similarly to the punching bag event, the goal of this event was to deal as much damage as possible with a single attack within 6 charges. There were a total of 5 stages, each released a day apart, and every stage had its own effective category in which units of the specified category would do increased damage. The Japanese version ended up winning and received a Cell winner card, while Global lost and received a Hercule loser card. The final event of Part 1 was the special Androids edition of Battlefield. Just like the 4th anniversary edition of Battlefield, this iteration was slightly easier than the traditional Battlefield bosses. Furthermore, they released 2 new units to the Battlefield shop, Android 18 and Krillin, both being decent options to help flesh out people's Android/Cell Saga teams. For Part 2, Dokkan introduced a new type of event into the game, Extreme Z areas. These were essentially Extreme Z battles, but for free-to-play characters, and you were restricted to a select pool of units who were typically free-to-play or banner units. The first ever Extreme Z area EZA'd the 2 free-to-play exchange units and made them even more valuable for players. Vegeta now stacked attack and defense on Super, and gained 2 ki and 90% attack and defense at the start of turn. Goku also now gave 2 ki to Goku's family category allies, and his support increased by 10%. Gohan and Trunks also became slightly stronger, but the stars of the show were most definitely Goku and Vegeta with their defense stacking. Most memorably, Part 2 came with the release of a brand new difficult event into the game, Infinite Dragon Ball History. This event dropped with 2 Android/Cell Saga themed stages, with Stage 1 being against the Z Warriors and Stage 2 being against the Androids. This event was similar in structure to the legendary Goku event, and although it was slightly easier, it still served as a fun and challenging alternative for testing out new units. Similar to the 4th anniversary Shenron event, completing this new Ultimate Lifeform story event gave players access to a new Extreme Z battle raid against Perfect Cell. This event came with the typical raid rewards, but it also brought with it the EZA for STR Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, who was very decent but nothing special. Completing the raid by depleting Cell's total health bar earned players a brand new Gohan themed wallpaper. The final thing to note is that for Part 2, they released a new top legendary summon banner featuring exchange 17 and 18 into 16. This unit gained 1 ki and 78% attack and defense, 2 ki and 40% attack to Androids category allies, and a medium chance to dodge when HP was 66% or more. They were obviously a ridiculous support unit for LR Cell, but their stats were a bit underwhelming in base, and they weren't too impressive defensively. They can exchange into Android 16 for 3 turns when facing a Cell enemy, or when there are 2 or more Androids allies on the team at 66% HP or less. 16 was very explosive, and was a top 5 unit in the game once he came out. He gained 6 ki, 200% to stats, and a high chance to crit, allowing him to absolutely eviscerate bosses. He was also very tanky, especially after performing a 12 ki super, but he was unfortunately only around for 3 short turns. Not a bad LR by any means, but they were a pretty easy skip for most players. Some of you might have noticed, but this was a top legendary summon banner, so there should be 2 new LRs featured on the banner, right? Instead of releasing a second LR, they decided to update the Ultra Super Attack animation for Int LR Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, and featured him alongside the physical androids. Gohan's 18 ki super was massively memed within the community due to how bad his walking animation was, but Dokkan finally decided to fix Gohan's legs and gave him a very clean looking Ultra Super Attack. All in all, they released many new features and events, 2 powerful free-to-play cards, and gave players over 1,000 stones throughout the celebration period. Despite the controversy of Gohan and Cell, the $300 million download celebration left its mark as one of the greatest celebrations in the game's history, right behind the 4th anniversary. In a fitting and surprising turn, Dokkan dove back into the future timeline and released a new transforming Future Gohan. This unit introduced the Bond of Master and Disciple category into the game and was also the leader for Hybrid Saiyans. This unit gained 100% to stats, supported Bond of Master and Disciple allies for 1 ki and 30% to stats, and reduced damage received by 58% when HP was 58% or less. On top of gaining 50% defense on Super, this unit was a solid tank above 58% HP, and a juggernaut once his damage reduction went live. This unit had a regular transformation, becoming Super Saiyan Gohan starting from turn 4 when HP was 58% or more with Trunks on the team. Tech Trunks was still a strong unit, and LR Trunks and Mai were also somewhat usable, so Gohan didn't have much trouble fulfilling the Trunks condition for his transformation. Super Saiyan Future Gohan was very powerful, and that was mainly due to the fact that his 58% damage reduction was now guaranteed at the start of turn. However, there was one major concern with this unit, and that was the fact that he gained no start of turn defense. He only gained 1 ki and 30% attack and defense per Bond of Master and Disciple category ally in the turn, so without a full rotation of units on that category, Gohan was capable of taking sizable damage even through his huge damage reduction. He had a few somewhat annoying restrictions scattered throughout his kit, but he was still without a doubt a good unit and a powerful addition to his teams. Alongside Future Gohan, Dokkan revamped the Fight Against Despair story event and released 2 new strong free-to-play units, STR Future 18 and Tech Future 17. Both stacked attack and defense on Super by 20% and gained additional stats when the other was on rotation, making them solid options for the legendary Goku event and Infinite Dragon Ball history. A few mid-EZAs later, and it was time for the Halloween campaign. The main free-to-play unit this year was Great Saiyaman Kid Trunks, accompanied by awakenings for the previous 2 Halloween units. Saiyaman Trunks stacked defense on Super, automatically making him a contender in longer events. Surprisingly, he was also a fairly solid damage dealer thanks to his additional normal attacks and crit chance, which built up to 49% with each attack performed. Likewise, Candy Vegito had become a good unit across the entire game after becoming a TUR. His dodge chance increased from 50% to 70%, and his stun chance went from a rare chance to medium chance, further solidifying him as a great Super Battle Road unit. However, Candy Vegito now also stacked attack and defense on Super, making him a real option in the legendary Goku event. Gotenks and Ghosts didn't change as much as Candy Vegito, but he was still an amazing stunning unit in Super Battle Road. The Int-type support units also received an awakening at this time, and despite us being in the category meta, these units still had their uses as great battlefield leaders. Gohan and Vegeta now gain 20% attack and defense per key sphere obtained. randomly changed key spheres to their respective type, and now gave 50% support instead of 40%. All of the type supports would receive the same type of buff after awakening, with the main difference between them still being their different super attack effects. With the Halloween celebration behind us, we would normally move on to talking about the next Dokkan Fest unit. But as 2019 had shown us time and again, this was no ordinary year. This next character far surpassed the power level of any card released around this time before, and was perhaps the strongest villain unit we had seen yet.
さあ始めようか。